partisan as it has been for decades. And I tell you this, those who seek to use Israel as a means to scoring political points do a disservice to both Israel and the United States. Our politics may be more polarized than ever, but it's incumbent upon all of us who care about U.S.-Israel relationship to keep it bipartisan. We must pledge to one another that we'll keep the polarization of Washington away from poisoning the bipartisan support that Israel has always enjoyed. My friends, we also must continue to stand firm against the BDS movement. I have long opposed the BDS movement publicly, privately, and continuously because its founders and too many of its supporters do not believe the Jewish people have a right to any state in their homeland, whatever its size and boundaries. We must be clear-eyed about the history of this BDS movement. I ask anybody who supports BDS or is considering supporting it, particularly young people who may be of goodwill, to remember the following, and we, us, must make sure they know it. Even before Israel came into existence, boycotts were used as a weapon of those who opposed the very existence of the Jewish state. During the 20s and 30s, Arab leaders organized boycotts of the Jewish community in Palestine, calling for the picketing of Jewish-owned businesses and general strikes that devolved into violence. And as soon as Israel came into existence, the Arab League instituted an official boycott of the fledgling nation, and soon thereafter a boycott of anyone who did business with Israel, and then anyone who did business with anyone who did business with Israel. Some of you my age will remember, in those days we were so proud of Air France. Every other airline boycotted Israel and wouldn't fly there. But only Air France would fly to Israel. All the others were participating in the Arab boycott. We must never go back to the days when major companies boycott Israel as they did in the 50s and 60s. And more than 30 years would pass because the Arab League boycott was broken by Egypt. And still today, there are nations that actively enforce a primary boycott of Israel. BDS must be understood first and foremost as the next chapter of this troubled past. Make no mistake about it. BDS's founders did not believe in any state of Israel, and too many of its leading proponents, not all but too many, want nothing more than for Israel to disappear. Look no further than the words of the movement's founder, Omar, who said, quote, "We oppose a Jewish state in any part of Palestine." And he also said, quote, "Jews are not a people." Now, my personal experience has borne this out. Whenever I speak and argue with those who most actively push BDS, I ask them a very simple question. Do you support a Jewish state? All too often, too many, not all, but many too many, will waffle or they'll say no. They do not support a Jewish state. That's not a disagreement over policy. That's not a disagreement over borders. It's a disagreement over Israel's very right to exist, and we must never accept that kind of disagreement. So from the moment Israel drew her first breath until this very moment, Israel has long been threatened by boycott movements. And I will always stand with Israel against those who seek to do her harm by boycott or by any other means. Now, just as we must educate the world about the true origins of the BDS movement, so too are we called on to confront a greater and more ancient threat to the Jewish people: anti-Semitism. That poison, the same poison that chased countless Jewish people from Europe and killed so many who remained, the same poison that scattered the Jewish people to the winds and made us foreigners in our own countries. That same poison cannot be allowed to fester here. In the last decade, there's been a resurgence of anti-Semitism in Europe, where it always seems to live and grow deep in the soil. But now, in the past few years, there's been a resurgence in America. Just last October, we watched in horror as the single greatest massacre of Jews on American soil was perpetrated by an anti-Semitic, white supremacist terrorist in Pittsburgh. Sadly, between 2016 and 17, the U.S. saw the largest increase in harassment, vandalism, and assault of Jews and Jewish institutions. I, like you, feel the same dread, the same alarm that past generations of Jews have felt when anti-Semitism rears its ugly head and begins inevitably to walk hand in hand with violence against Jews. When we read about Jewish cemeteries defaced by swastikas, when we watch white supremacists march down the streets of a proud American city chanting, "Jews will not replace us," and burn it down outside a synagogue, or when we hear about a man who walks into a kosher grocery in Paris to murder Jews. When we see or hear anti-Semitism, we have a solemn obligation not to hold our tongues or parse our language, but call it out with courage, with clarity. When someone names only prominent Jews as trying to buy or steal our elections, we must call it out. When someone says that being Jewish and supporting Israel means you're not loyal to America, we must call it out. When someone looks at a neo-Nazi rally and sees some very fine people among its company, we must call it out. When someone suggests that money drives support for Israel, we must call it out. We are here because we support the only Jewish state in the world and because it's in America's interest to support Israel. Any suggestion to the contrary, whether made out of malice or ignorance, is hurtful, it's wrong. We cannot be afraid to say that it's wrong and hurtful. But even more than that, these age-old anti-Semitic tropes are false and must renounce them. You can be a Jew and care about Israel, and it doesn't make you any less of an American. You can be a Jew and lobby for Israel, and it doesn't make us any less of an American. It makes you a better American. You can be all at once, my friends, completely Jewish, completely pro-Israel, and completely American. And we are. That is what makes this country so exceptional. To say anything otherwise is completely false, has no place in our public discourse. So we must call out anti-Semitism whenever we hear it, from wherever it arises. It has become too prevalent in our politics to identify anti-Semitism only when it comes from political opponents. It will always be wrong to use anti-Semitism as a political weapon, always. And let me tell you, if you only care about anti-Semitism coming from your political opponents, you are not fully committed to fighting anti-Semitism. So, my friends, in conclusion, this matters a great deal. The fact that today we must once again face down the ancient poison of anti-Semitism is a reminder of what Israel has meant to the Jewish people. It reminds me of what Israel meant to me, long before my name ever appeared on a ballot, long before I ever thought of being an elected official. As a boy, I grew up hearing stories of my great-grandmother, the matriarch of our family. In 1941, when the Nazis invaded Ukraine, then part of Galicia, they asked my grandmother to gather her children and their children on the porch of her home. They said, "You come with us." She said, "We will not leave." And they gunned down all 17 of them from age 1 to age 81. Now, as a proud grandfather myself of Noah, I carry with me the stories of 5 generations of Schumers. Schumers who did not escape the Shoah, and those who did, including my grandparents, who, feeling persecution, found sanctuary on these wonderful shores, where, because of the tolerance and openness and opportunity that courses through all American life, their grandson could stand before you as the highest elected Jewish official ever in America. And I know you join me. We all cannot help but think we are the lucky ones. I know I'm not alone in bearing the weight of these generations and the painful history of our people. Each one of us has these stories. And it is because we carry with us the history. We feel so deeply about the cause of Israel and the friendship between the United States and Israel. It is because of this history that I want Israel to be always there, always prosperous, always strong, always free. My friends, we must never forget what Israel and her freedom mean to the Jewish people and what the friendship of the United States means to securing